Everybody, my name is Gabe Howard, and I would like to welcome you to another edition of NAMI Tennessee at Home Facebook Live. We do these every Monday at, 2 Central, 3 Eastern, and I know there's other time zones, but I only ever name those two. We have a super awesome show. And if you're watching live, which why wouldn't you be? Live is awesome. You can drop your questions in the comments and we will address as many as we can. Shorter questions work better. And as always, please be polite and respectful. All right. Now, for people who tune in week after week after week, you know that I'm going to tell you all about NAMI Tennessee's email list over at namitn.org. It is a great way to keep up with everything that NAMI Tennessee is doing, not just stuff like this that, like I said, happens every Monday, but also legislative advocacy, fundraisers, efforts in the community to make life better for people living with mental illness and their families. It's a super cool thing to be a part of, and it's absolutely free. So please head over to namitn.org and sign up right now. And last but not least, if you're watching the video, that's great. We love videos. Feel free to share, send it everywhere. You can't ask questions because, we're not live anymore, but this one and all the previous ones are available as videos, and we hope that you will tune in and you get a lot from it because the replays are awesome. All right, well, that is certainly enough of me. I would like to introduce our super special guest, Conor. Conor, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hello, Gabe. Thank you for having me. And my name is Conor Bezane. I'm 42 years old, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. And I have bipolar disorder, and I also am a recovering alcoholic. I will be 10 years sober in February, so that's coming up. And I lived in New York for about 10 years in the early 2000s, and I worked as a producer for MTV News. So my specialties, I'm a writer, a journalist, and my specialties are music, mental health, pop culture. That's what I deal in, and that's what, if you read my stuff, that's what you'll find.
Conor, thank you so much. I promised you a different first question, but I just want to ask, was working for MTV super cool? It's like
It was
nothing to do with
totally
mental
cool.
health, but was it awesome?
It was awesome. Yeah, I got to meet a lot of different celebrities and interview them, or even just people would show up at the office. Like, I have a picture of myself with Mr. T, if people remember that, Mr. T
Yeah.
from the '80s, from the A Team show, and yeah, I interviewed everyone from Green Day to the Beastie Boys before Ad Rock died, so that was kind of cool. And yeah, I cut 3 to 5 minute packages, news packages, um, and it was a lot of fun until I got laid off along with 20 people. But so it goes, so it goes.
So, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your history. I mean, it's you worked at MTV right when I was at the intersection of MTV was super cool. Now MTV is like miscellaneous television. I don't think I ever have
Oh
it on,
yeah,
but
I don't recommend watching MTV these days.
for a long time, like there was a certain period of time where MTV was pretty much if it wasn't primetime television, like Friends or Seinfeld, it was on MTV. I mean, I
It was
think
like the default. If you didn't
yeah.
like what was on, you turn on MTV. But the problem is they don't show videos because videos don't get ratings. So we always
Oh,
get confused, or we always get bashed for not playing videos, and it's because they don't get ratings.
because
They can't
nobody
make any
watches
money.
it.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you
well,
see a video you don't like, you change the channel.
exactly. The days of music television are over. I do think that the M stands for miscellaneous now, but nobody called and asked me. So,
Yeah, that sounds
well,
right to me.
let's jump into it, Connor. The first question we have is your diagnosis is bipolar disorder, as you said. What does that mean, and how does it manifest for you personally?
Well, yes, I have bipolar disorder, and what that is, it used to be called manic depression, and now it's called bipolar. And what it means is you have different moods, and The first mood is mania, and that is extreme happiness, like feeling like you are on top of the world, that you can do anything and be anybody. It can be fun until it gets scary. And the flip side is depression, which is obviously, an extreme degree of sadness. And my personal experience with bipolar is I have I had a major manic episode in New York City around 2008, and I haven't had any major manic episodes since then, but I've had depressive episodes, several.
And oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, good, 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 good. Sorry about that. Sometimes the technology is iffy. Now, all of that, it sounds like you were diagnosed because of the manic episode, or what
Yes.
led you to diagnose the manic episode?
Well, okay. It all started when I was working for MTV News, and it was 2008 presidential election year, and we did Q&A sessions with college students with the candidates, and they were half-hour live shows, and I worked on the one with John McCain. And I remember just, I had a couple hours of downtime before the show started, and I would I was sitting in my hotel room and standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down, and I just couldn't calm down, and I had sweaty palms. I don't know if any of you get this, but sweaty palms when you're anxious, it's horrible. It's like my least favorite
Yeah,
symptom of
like
of
clammy.
clammy hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the show ended up going on perfectly fine, and but I knew that something was wrong, so I went to see a psychiatrist in New York, and she diagnosed me with major depression and prescribed Prozac. Now, if you take an antidepressant like Prozac, it will skyrocket your mood and make you just feel so good, and it's dangerously good because you do kind of crazy things. Like, for example, I went on a shopping spree and I bought a $1,600 Paul Smith tailored suit, non returnable. And I bought a $300 pair of sunglasses at Saks Fifth Avenue. And yeah, so those are souvenirs from my mania. And I'll have them forever, which is nice. But yeah, it wasn't the wisest choice. But yeah, I mean, I felt like I was being watched. I felt like I might be on a reality TV show. I would walk down the street and think that people were talking about me. Um, I would stay up all night writing articles for MTV News and tinkering with the words to make everything perfect. And I would turn them in the morning on 0 hours sleep. And I got really great feedback from my bosses. They loved what I was writing, and it was when I was manic. So I guess my best writing comes when I'm manic, but I'm not going to induce mania anytime soon.
Well, I know you've answered some of this in the first question. Thank you so much. It was the mania that led you to the diagnosis, and you talked about like your first major manic episode for us and what happened. So this is sort of an offshoot to that question. Thank you so much, Connor. But you touched on something there, which you said you did really great writing while manic, but you also spent all your money and left yourself in a bad place. And there's a lot of people who don't understand bipolar disorder, that they only hear what they want to hear. They're like, oh, well, Mania is good. He just said he did really good writing. And they seem to ignore the part where you said that you were in danger, you spent all your money, that it wasn't healthy for you, and that of course you don't want it back. What do you have to say to those people that only hear, oh, well, he said it was good, when you had just said you're not inviting it back anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, it was a psychotic episode that I have, if you know what psychosis is. It's basically what happened is I was obsessed with Facebook, and I would post to Facebook my status updates every 5 minutes. And I'm not talking like intermittently, I'm talking about seriously every 5 minutes a status update on Facebook. And I mean, it was dangerous. Like I was doing, and this goes to the addiction angle of it. While I was staying up all night writing those stories, I was drinking 6 to 12 beers, one bottle of wine or two, not all together, but yeah. So either 2 6-packs or 2 bottles of wine, and smoking pot, and that's just unhealthy for someone who's bipolar.
Very, very true. Now, for our audience members that don't know what dual diagnosis is, can you explain what that is, and then talk about how your addiction? Thank you so much for disclosing and for sharing. And bipolar disorder. What did that coupling look like for you?
Well, I think that those of us with bipolar disorder, are hardwired to have a problem with addiction, because we have these manic episodes and you feel high. You feel like you're on drugs. You feel like you're on cocaine. I've never done cocaine, but from what I've heard about it, it makes you very hyper. It makes you very alert. And that's what mania feels like. And so when the mania goes away and you start to feel normal again, you want to recreate that high. And the way to do it is through alcohol and drugs. So I think if you are bipolar, my psychiatrist in New York used to tell me you can have one beer once in a while. And that's probably good advice. But I mean, I'm an advocate for not drinking. I just don't think drinking or recreational drugs are a good idea if you're bipolar.
There's a lot of research that shows that for a number of reasons. One, it can push you into depression or mania. If you are on medication or in treatment, it can mess with that. I mean, it is well understood that alcohol and some medications, of course, don't mix well. Now, one of the things as I'm listening to you talk, and I think it's like, okay, well, I think that's like a very reasonable thing. Okay, I live with bipolar disorder, and it's not a good idea for me to partake in to drink or do certain drugs, etc. But the part that I get hung up on a little bit, Connor, is that bipolar disorder sort of robs us of being rational, right? If we were rational and logical and could make good decisions, we probably wouldn't be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Does that make it more difficult? Because for what it's worth, I agree with you. I think a lot of people suffering from bipolar disorder self-medicate with drugs and alcohol as a way to, tame the beast or quell their emotions or end their suffering. So it's the worst thing for people like us to do, but it's so common. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Um, I'm actually, could you kind of repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the a lot of people with bipolar disorder, and I live with bipolar disorder as longtime watchers of the show know, it's difficult to find ways to stop our minds, right? The symptoms cause great pain, and it almost sets us up to find ways to self-medicate in whatever that looks like. And a common one is drugs and alcohol because of its impact on the brain. What are some thoughts on that for people living with bipolar disorder that are turning to drugs and alcohol? Because in their own way, they're trying, right? That's why it's called self-medicating, right? Because they're trying to help themselves. But as you learned, it's not good. So my specific question is what ideas, I hate to use the word advice, but what thoughts do you have for people with bipolar disorder or depression or mental illness who may be using drugs and alcohol to self-medicate to choose a better path?
Well, I think, well, let me tell you this one thing first. So when you're manic, you have these very intrusive thoughts and racing thoughts. So your brain is full speed ahead, and all of these ideas keep popping in your head. And so that's another reason um, why you drink, to mellow out. And as far as advice or ideas for people, there is a it's not a well, it's kind of like a glossary of help options for people in the back of my book, The Bipolar Addict. There, anything from where to get help for bipolar disorder, where to get help for depression or gambling addiction, or self-harm. All of those are in the back of the book, so it's a good resource. And also, I think if you're kind of on the fence, you're not really sure if you're bipolar, maybe you are, maybe you're not, you can go to Facebook, and there are many groups, many mental health groups, bipolar groups, addiction groups, and you can just sort of lurk there for a while and see, get a feel for the group, and then maybe ask a question and say, hey, do you think I might be bipolar? These are my symptoms.
That is really good advice. I definitely think that doing something in a moving forward in a productive manner is always good. I talk a lot on this show and in advocacy that people feel so strongly that they can't go get help unless they know what's wrong with them when it comes to mental health. People are like, well, I'm not sure if I have bipolar disorder, so I don't want to make an appointment with a psychiatrist. And I'm just, could you imagine if somebody said, I'm not sure if I have cancer, so I don't want to make an appointment with a doctor? It's like, so
Right.
you suspect that you might have cancer, but you're going to stay at home until you personally know. Like, that's not how we approach physical health. If we suspect something is wrong, we go get it looked at by a doctor. But in mental health, so many people are like, well, I'm not sure if I have depression, so I'm going to wait. Make the appointment. What's the worst that could happen? You find out you're okay. Like, that's a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's ridiculous. I think what what I think basically about mental health care is, I believe it should be free, and certain people like Bernie Sanders have advocated for um, free healthcare, free mental health care, free dentistry, all of that, vision. And I think, with a new administration in the White House, they are taking steps, little baby steps, but they are taking steps to help us who are mentally ill.
I completely agree. It seems that uh, when you're sick, you can't work. When you're sick, you can't work. I think that's definitely well understood. And if you can't work, you can't get health care. And if you can't get health care, you can't get better. So that's sort of what we're looking at. I'm a firm believer in that every able-bodied person should work, but the key word there, of course, is able-bodied. So I would like to see more people have access to health care so that there would be, well, less reasons not to work, right? When I was really, really sick, I was super lucky because even though I couldn't work, I had health care through a spouse. But man, if I wouldn't have had that health care through my spouse, I would have just been really sick, unemployed, no health insurance, and I never would have become the fine taxpayer that I am today.
Yeah, I think it's really hard if you don't have money. If you don't have the means to treat yourself to expensive therapist appointments, because they're expensive. But some social workers, some therapists, some psychiatrists, they work on a sliding scale, so you can pay less than what maybe someone else is paying, and it's really hard to find out all of who is is offering that. But I think, for example, NAMI, I believe, has, well, like Tennessee. If you're from Tennessee and you go to the NAMI page or ask NAMI what what therapists are on a sliding scale that I could afford. I'm not sure that they can provide you with the answer, but they could point you in the right direction where to find that info.
If you go to NAMI National's page, nami.org, they have all kinds of resources. And again, depending on where you are in Tennessee, where you are in the world, and where you are watching this, they may or may not have the resources that you need. And unfortunately, that's another advocacy point. And that depending on where you live, for even from state to state, city to city, city versus rural, on and on and on, East Coast, West Coast, there's the the laws and the options are just so very very different. I discovered that I'm very I live in a big city in the state of Ohio, so we've got, state of Ohio has Medicaid, Medicare suspend that. The state of Ohio has Medicaid expansion, whereas the state of Tennessee doesn't. So, and I'm in a big city, so I had more providers that were willing to accept the sliding scale than if I was in a small town in Tennessee that doesn't have Medicaid expansion. It only has 3 therapists or 3 doctors, and only one of them takes it. And of course, they're inundated, so your wait times are 4 to 5 to 6 months. We definitely need a fix because there's people ready, willing, and able to get care that just simply aren't able to access it through no fault of their own. And I agree with you, Connor. I'd love to see a solution to that. Let's switch gears ever so slightly, and I love this question. Thank you so much for submitting it. It's let's talk about the narrative of the tortured artist. Who are some famous faces who live with bipolar and addiction?
Yes, there is a strong narrative of the tortured artist. It's almost cliche, or it is kind of a cliche, tortured artist. Everyone says that. But it's really true. And if you look at bipolar and you look back in history, there are many famous faces who struggled with bipolar and addiction, plus addiction. So this double dragon that we're talking about. And for example, Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent van Gogh, Virginia Woolf. Those are some people from the past. Lord Byron, the poet. Those are some famous people from the past that struggled with addiction and bipolar. And then more recently, we have Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. We have Amy Winehouse, Robin Williams. The list goes on. And if you Google bipolar and famous, you'll come up with all of them. And I think there's a Wikipedia page too, listing all the people who are bipolar.
Now, one of the things that I think of when I hear about, like you said, the cliche of the tortured artist is that people are looking at it almost like it's a good thing. And in fact, I've heard people say it's like, oh, well, you can really hear the pain in their song, or you can really see the pain in her work. And they almost seem to be romanticizing it like, oh, well, I don't care that this person is suffering because the art is so beautiful.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I listen, as somebody who lives with bipolar disorder, I kind of take a dim view of people saying, "Hey, I don't care if you're suffering as long as you entertain me." How do you feel about that as someone who both creates art and lives with bipolar and addiction?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what came to mind to me just now is that, can you separate the artist from the art? And I dealt with this with the story I did for MTV News, a video piece. Is Michael Jackson relevant to young people? And now this was before Michael Jackson died. But most of the people that we talked to said, yes, we can separate the man from the music. And even though he's done these terrible things, or allegedly has done these terrible things, we like the music and it's not a problem for us. And, as far as with bipolar and artistry, I don't know. I do think that people with bipolar have a greater degree of passion and empathy, and that's why their art is so good. And I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying their art, even though they may have had this tortured artist narrative going on.
Yeah, it's sort of tough, right? Because nobody is saying that they don't want folks to get help, right? That's the I I go back and forth on how I feel about it depending on my mood. I know there's probably a bipolar joke in there somewhere. But I think that one of the things that I want people to understand is, of course, is let's say that a manic episode led to this brilliance. Well, it's okay to respect and love and enjoy the brilliance, but sincerely, don't try to put the person back in a situation where they're going to be sick again and hope for more art, right? uh, get that person help and just look at it as the silver lining in the cloud. Is that
Well,
generally
if
your
I can
feeling, or
interrupt you for a second,
yeah,
I,
please.
you know, I, um, it's really unfortunate, but a lot of people who are bipolar end up dying by suicide, especially these artists. Everyone I named of the contemporary people died by suicide, and it's really unfortunate. A lot of people's art careers get cut short, like Kurt Cobain. There are only 3 Nirvana albums and an unplugged and a B-sides compilation. If I'm getting it right off the top of my head, and I always wonder, what would happen. What would the music be like if he was still making music? If Kurt Cobain was still making music? And I love Nirvana. They're my favorite band. I definitely feel like I connect with the lyrics because he is bipolar and he has written these lyrics. They're bipolar to a T. He even has a song called Lithium.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say that. There's even a
Yeah.
song called Lithium.
Yeah. So people don't talk about his bipolar much, but he had stomach issues as well. So he was really in a dark place. But it's really unfortunate that a lot of bipolar people, a lot of bipolar addicts, die by suicide.
Very, very true. And while we're on the music topic, let's talk about your recovery and what role music played in your recovery.
Music is everything in my recovery. It is so important. Every night I sit down and either with my turntable and some vinyl or Spotify, and I listen to music intently for 2 hours, almost as a means of meditation. It's so important to me. And I, you know, for as long as I can remember, I remember being 4 years old and trying to break dance in the living room to Michael Jackson's "Wanna Be Starting Something," and probably looking like a fool, but I've always loved music, and it's my greatest passion. And I also really dig punk rock, and in the Bipolar Addict, there's a whole chapter devoted to how punk rock saved my life. And what I like about punk is the anti-establishment philosophy, and also the do-it-yourself ethic. There's very much this idea that you should do everything yourself and make it great and make it how you want it. And that's sort of how this book, The Bipolar Addict, came to be. I worked with an editor, yes, but it was pretty much the two of us plus a web designer. That was the core people that helped me get this book out. And so, punk rock, DIY, that's sort of words to live by.
That is so. I know that you said that Nirvana was your favorite band, and we're kindred spirits. I know we're both about the same age. I'm going to be 45 here in about 2 weeks, so we're contemporaries, and we both live
Yes.
with bipolar disorder. So we might be the same person, Connor. I'm a little bit worried about this now, but I love Nirvana. But what is alternative rock? Is that style of music? Is that your favorite style of music, or is like what's your favorite type
um,
of music?
I listen to a lot of indie rock, so people like Bright Eyes and Phoebe Bridgers and the Mountain Goats. I absolutely love the Mountain Goats. They are, if you've never checked them out, John Darnielle, who is the leader of that band, he writes the most poetic lyrics, and they're really twisted, but they're really good. And he's very much a storyteller. I like bands and artists that are storytellers. But I also am very into jazz. I love Miles Davis. I love Billie Holiday. I love Thelonious Monk, and on and on. You know, and all that stuff I have on vinyl, and I love spinning it. And you know, I like everything from '80s new wave to um, '90s alternative to 2000s like alternative rock, and you know, everything in between, and hip hop too, mostly old school hip hop. But yeah, music is my life.
I absolutely love that. Let's talk about your book for a moment. You have interviews in your book, and I want to disclose to the audience that I wrote uh, um, the preface to it. Right? It was the
The
what did
blurb on the back of the book.
the blurb on the back. I knew that there was something that I wrote. I wrote a blurb on the back of the book, and it's a super cool book. So I want to disclose that I am not an unbiased observer. I read the book before it came out, wrote a blurb on it. Connor is super awesome. So I just want to disclose that. But you have interviews with fellow bipolar addicts in your book. What are some, like, tell us some stories about that? I mean, you got to sit down with some really cool people.
Yeah, I did. You know, everyone who's bipolar is interesting. I have never come across someone who's bipolar that is not like really deep and really interesting. I don't know what it is. It's just how we are. But anyway, yeah, I interviewed about 12 people for the book. Um, and I only used five of them, the best ones. And an example of one of the wild stories is I changed everyone's name for the book, but Ethan is somebody who went to Harvard and uh, lives in Chicago, and he went to the airport wearing nothing but a crimson bathrobe with $10,000 stuffed in his pockets, trying to fly to Argentina one way. And so um, he didn't get arrested. He got taken to the psych ward, which is good. But yeah, he was waving around his student ID, thinking it was a passport, and that was pretty wild. Another person, Natasha. I mean, she was in college, and she would bring water bottles full of vodka to class, and I mean that just shows you how ugly and how serious addiction is and alcoholism. I mean, she would drink like a full bottle of water bottle filled with vodka. And
Wow. And
yeah,
just walk around with it, right? Just
yeah,
like it was
like
normal
nobody,
to her.
it was normal to her. And she, you know, no one really knew unless they smelled her breath. But when you drink a lot, you do, like, the alcohol emanates from your pores. It's like obvious um, that you were drunk last night or you're drunk now. Like, it's obvious.
Plus, it probably makes it difficult to pay attention or to learn. So these are missed opportunities for her in her life when she should have been, learning, growing, making friends, paying attention, networking. She was focused on, desperation and alcoholism. Of course, it alters your mind. So there's a loss there. Not just there. I think there's more of a loss than people realize when it comes to bipolar disorder and addiction. There's not just the immediate loss. There's also when the rest of us turn 50 and we think about our formative years. Many of us have happy memories,
Yeah.
but I think of my formative years, and I don't have happy memories. I'm very glad at who I became, but it's that was like 2 decades ago. Why is it still haunting me? And I don't think people realize that. Is that something that you have noticed or that you learned in these stories that even though all these people I'm presuming many of these people are still in recovery to this day, they're still haunted by this past.
Oh yeah. You know, for example, one person, he's not in the book, but he has a really interesting story. I think his name is in the book is Patrick. I'm not sure. I can't remember right now. But he lived in a trailer park in Florida, and his dad would bully him, and actually he, this is when he was really young, like 8 or 9 years old. One time he hit Patrick with a 2x4 piece of wood, and another time he was going alligator hunting, and he brought back an alligator into the trailer, and a dead alligator, and Patrick was sleeping, and his dad came up with the alligator right next to his head and made it chomp like that, and it scared the shit out of him.
Wow. I mean, that's the kind of thing that lingers. It's not something that just goes away, and sometimes I don't think people realize that, and I think it's good that we're able to point this out. Now we have a Facebook user that just popped in and asked what book it was. It's The Bipolar Addict. It was written by Connor. Connor, can you hold up the book? It's sitting right there.
Well,
I thought it would be easy. But here's the website for it while he goes and grabs a copy. Or not the Bipolar Addict is the name of the book. And you can go to thebipolaraddict.com and there's his blog and information. But there, flip it around. Oh, there it is.
Here you go.
Yay!
Here's the book. The Bipolar Addict, Drinks, Drugs, Delirium, and Why Sober is the New Cool.
Yeah, I highly recommend checking that out. Now, as we segue into, you obviously wrote a very, very cool book, but let's say that you were writing a manual for bipolar addicts, and it was to help handle their condition. What information would you include, Connor?
Well, I definitely would say don't drink and don't do drugs, recreational drugs, because I think I said this before, but I think we are hardwired for addiction problems, people with bipolar. And, if you find, I'm lucky enough to have had a very supportive family. I went to rehab and they helped me financially with that. And, they cared enough to have an intervention for me, and I met with the interventionist with my family for 3 sessions before I decided that, okay, I'll go. And but some people don't have the means to go to rehab or go to see a therapist. Alcoholics Anonymous is a good place to go. It's free. So is Narcotics Anonymous, also free. There are a lot of groups anonymous. There's a Crystal Meth Anonymous. These are all listed in the back of my book.
That is it. There's it. I know that it can be difficult to have to advocate for yourself, but I'm like you. I encourage people to advocate as hard as you can. And for the family members of people, I'm in the same situation as you, Connor. I'm so fortunate to have a loving family and friends, because if I would have had to manage this by myself, I don't think I would have made it. I'm always surprised at the number of people that are like, "Oh, Gabe, you worked so hard and you did such a good job." And I was like, "Well, thank you, but yeah, to pretend that it was all me is well, that's just insane." My family works so hard. My grandparents, my parents, even my baby sister. So if you are the friend or family member of somebody who is suffering, know that you have an instrumental role to play. And also know that I did not realize it or thank them for like years. So it was kind of a thankless job for them for a while, but they saved my life. They
Absolutely,
really
and
did.
I feel the same way. My family saved my life, and you know, going back to the intervention, I wanted to mention that sort of the impetus for me going to rehab was my sister on the 3rd session of the intervention. She brought a photo of me and my mom and her and my 2-year-old nephew at the time, and we're posing in front of a Peter Rabbit statue in Central Park in New York. And it's just a really good photo. And I look really good and I look happy and I don't look like down in the dumps, drunk Connor. Like I actually look good in the photo. And so she shoved that photo in my face and said, "This is the Connor I know. You know, this is I don't know what this bag of bones is right now in front of me, but this is my Connor and this is who I want to see again. And if you don't go to rehab, I'm not going to let you see my son anymore." And that really hit me. And it wasn't even I mean my son, not your nephew, but my son. You know, she was that protective of it. And that really hit me and that was really the reason why I went to rehab.
Wow, it's powerful, and that had to be difficult to say to somebody. I mean, I
Yeah.
think about, you and I, we kind of look at it from our perspective, but man, think of having to say that to somebody that you love, that you can't see their child anymore. I mean, it sounds devastating.
Yeah. And I don't recommend if you're a family or a friend out there of someone who's bipolar or who has addiction or both, I don't recommend ultimatums. Obviously, it worked in my case, but it's really kind of not a good idea. It's it's a little manipulative. Not that I resent my sister doing that because I feel so good now at post rehab. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and and I feel so great, and I feel like I'm working on interesting projects and maybe there's going to be a sequel to the book. It's sort of bouncing around in my head right now. And yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way, like going to rehab and then getting sober and gradually restarting my writing career. It's all is great.
I know what you mean. I completely agree with you. The one of the things that got me on the straight and narrow was a friend of mine screaming at me. Her exact words were, "Your sad story isn't going to pay your bills," and so
Hmm.
she's just, because I was just complaining and whining and saying how unfair it was because I was devastated, and she had just snapped. There's no other word. I mean, she had done everything right for so long, and uh, there was there was just a moment where that worked. But I sort of look at it and advise people that it's really the nuclear option, because if you give an ultimatum like that, you have to you have to keep with it. You can't, if you give somebody an ultimatum and then take it back, your credibility is gone. Uh,
Yeah.
so so but at the same time, if that really is the choice, I mean, she was at the end of her rope. She had decided that that was the end. Either I was going to do this or she was going to leave. So while it was an ultimatum, it wasn't manipulation, because she was just basically informing me of my choices. I believed her, and I like you, am glad. But these are not happy moments, and they linger. And I
Right.
think sometimes people don't realize that when they see, Connor doing well, they don't realize that, yeah, there's some trauma there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some drama.
Yeah, there's some trauma. We're getting lots of comments in the. Oh, sorry, I took away from it. A supportive family is critical. I plan to get the book. Thank you. This is very interesting. And somebody wants to know, and I'm curious as well. Have you ever heard of Andrew Neil? Appears to be a musician.
No, I that one doesn't sound familiar to me.
So apparently Andrew Neil spent, and again, thank you, Facebook user, for providing this for us. Andrew spent 3 years in a state mental hospital. His album Code Purple is the only album ever produced in which all the songs were written and recorded in a state mental hospital. And that's I am putting it up here for public consumption. I have not verified this, but I am sure that a Google search will determine whether or not it's true. But I imagine that it is, because people generally don't get on our get on our Facebook lives to give us information that is not true. So check that out. That's very interesting, and I will
Yeah, I
absolutely
will
be
definitely
checking it
check
out
that out. Of
afterwards.
course, you know that I'm into music, so I'll check it out. But
Yeah.
another example of a band that wrote about bipolar is this band Titus Andronicus. They're an indie rock band. I think they're from New Jersey, I think. But they have an album called The Most Lamentable Tragedy. And it's all about the lead singer and his bipolar. And it's sort of a mix of alternative rock and punk. It's a good album. I would recommend it. The Most Lamentable Tragedy.
The Most Lamentable Tragedy. Very cool. Well, we are out of time. Conor, first off, I want to make sure that we plug everything. So you've got the book, The Bipolar Addict. It's available wherever fine books are sold. I'm sure it's on Amazon, correct?
Correct.
Of course. Your website is thebipolaraddict.com. Tons and tons and tons of free resources there, including your blog. Highly recommend everybody within the sound of my voice check it out. And Conor, what are some last words, if you have any, what are some last words for folks that you just want them to take away as they move throughout their day?
I hope that, you know, you're able to get something out of my book and be inspired and feel some camaraderie there with my story and the stories of the 5 others that I've included.
Well, thank you so much both for writing the book and for being on this show. We really, really appreciate it. The name of the book is The Bipolar Addict, Drinks, Drugs, Delirium, and Why Sober is the New Cool. Again, available wherever fine books are sold. You can also check out Conor's website on thebipolaraddict.com. And last but certainly not least, NAMI Tennessee's email list. I swear people think I get like $1 every time somebody signs up. I really don't. I just want everybody to know what NAMI Tennessee is up to. You can go to namitn.org, sign up for that list. Obviously, it's going to let you know who our guests are and what's going on every Monday at 2 Central, 3 Eastern. But also, it puts you in connection with advocacy events, the gala that we have every year, holiday parties, online events, as we're starting to get more and more in-person events. But we are all advocates for mental health, and NAMI Tennessee definitely makes it easier to advocate, telling you what's coming up because they watch the government so you don't have to. That's namitn.org. Sign up for NAMI Tennessee's email list. We will see you next Monday at 2 Central, 3 Eastern. Thanks, everybody.